Hi, I am Niharika Nanda, and you are listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. For the citizens of Delhi, the Yamuna, the city's most prominent river, has become one of the many symbols of just how polluted their city is. Every few months, the river is covered in a layer of white foam. And while it may look like clouds floating on water, it actually is a toxic cocktail of industrial waste and untreated sewage. In almost every election in the capital, including the latest one, politicians promise that if they come to power, they will clean up the river. Yet, not much ever changes. And while many see the Yamuna just as a river that they pass during their daily commute, for some, it is their lifeline. Recently, the Indian Express's Sophiya, Mathew and Devansh Mittal reported on the condition of the river and those who rely on it for their livelihoods. We are dedicating today's show to speaking with them about what their reporting uncovered. Sophiya, let's begin with you. We know that the Yamuna almost always becomes a poll issue. Can you tell us in what way it was discussed in the recently concluded ones?
So the Yamuna had been an issue between different states like Haryana and the Delhi government. So it became an issue, especially in the Delhi elections, when the Aam Aadmi Party had blamed the Haryana government, saying they are deliberately poisoning Delhi's water supply. So Arvind Kejriwal, Aam Aadmi Party national convener, had accused the BJP government for doing this. And even the then Delhi Chief Minister Atishi and the Punjab CM Bhagwant Singh Mann, they had all raised this issue that, deliberately the Haryana government is poisoning Yamuna river water. Because the levels of ammonia then had also increased a lot. So that was the issue that was brought up by the Aam Aadmi Party.
भारतीय जनता पार्टी की हरियाणा की सरकार ने दिल्ली में यमुना से आने वाले पानी में जहर मिला के भेज दिया है। ये तो हमारे भला हमारे दिल्ली जल बोर्ड के इंजीनियर्स का कि उन्होंने पकड़ लिया। उन्होंने दिल्ली के बॉर्डर पे ही वो पानी रोक दिया और उस पानी को दिल्ली के अंदर नहीं आने दिया। अगर वो पानी दिल्ली के अंदर आ जाता और पीने के पानी में मिल जाता, दिल्ली के अंदर ना जाने कितने लोगों की मौत हो जाती है, एक मास जेनोसाइड हो जाता दिल्ली के अंदर अगर ये पानी जो
the Haryana government reacted to this entire issue by the chief minister himself taking a sip of the river water to show that the water can be drinkable. So when Naib Singh Saini did that, it became a very important standpoint between the parties during the assembly polls.
आज केजरीवाल ने कहा है कि दिल्ली जल बोर्ड के इंजीनियरों ने पानी को दिल्ली आने से रोक दिया क्योंकि उन्हें पता लगा कि इसमें जहर है। मैं अरविंद केजरीवाल से पूछना चाहता हूं कि यह किस दिन की बात है? इंजीनियरों ने किस तरह निष्कर्ष निकाला कि इसमें जहर है? केजरीवाल बताए कि कौन सा जहर डाला गया, कितने टन जहर डाला गया, फिर बॉर्डर पर पानी को कैसे रोका, कोई दीवार बनाई, कहां बनाई, कितना समय लगा, कितना खर्च हुआ, और फिर हरियाणा ने तो कभी भी पानी नहीं रोका। तो जो पानी रोका, इन्होंने वो कहां गया? इस जहरीले पानी से कितनी मछलियां मरी? इस सरासर झूठे और घटिया बयान के लिए वो हरियाणा और दिल्ली की जनता से तुरंत माफी मांगे, वरना हम उसके खिलाफ मानहानि का दावा करेंगे।
And especially for those who don't reside in Delhi, can you give us a sense of just how dirty and polluted the river actually is?
Yes, Niharika. So, water quality in Delhi is regularly monitored by the Delhi Pollution Control Committee, and it puts out monthly reports after monitoring at 8 specific locations in the capital. And the monitoring starts from Palla, where the river water enters from Haryana, till Asgarpur village, where it exits to UP. So, especially since recent years, we have been seeing these parameters that the Pollution Control Committee has been monitoring to spike up immensely. For example, biological oxygen demand, BOD, then fecal coliform levels, which we call FC, and chemical oxygen demand COD and dissolved oxygen DO. These are the parameters that is monitored. So to tell things in short, if dissolved oxygen needs to be high to show that there is aquatic life that the river can sustain, and if the FC is high, it definitely is a very bad thing for the river, because high fecal coliform levels show that there is untreated sewage that is being discharged to the river Yamuna. So we've noticed that the latest February report by DPCC shows that fecal coliforms have soared to 16 million units per 100 ml. And that is really high. It is 6,400 times the permissible limit that is set by the Central Pollution Control Board. So not only fecal coliform levels, sadly biological oxygen demand levels, which indicates that the oxygen required for aquatic life, that parameter is also very high. It's significantly worsening over the years. So the safe BOD limit is 3 milligram per liter, which is, sometimes we see that at Palla and monitoring location, it is fulfilled. But whenever we go down, like up to Wazirabad or up to Okhla, it increases, and it is sometimes 25 times or 30 times the permissible limit.
And recently, there was also a water quality analysis done by the Delhi Pollution Control Committee. What did the analysis reveal about the river's pollution levels?
So, water quality analysis by Delhi Pollution Control Committee, Niharika, is done every month. So, we have the latest report they've put out in February, and it shows that the dissolved oxygen levels become zero for the most part of the, Delhi stretch. And even earlier, government records have showed that even though there's just 2% of the river that flows in Delhi, but it contributes 97% of the pollution load that, river Yamuna finally suffers from. And also the water quality analysis by DPCC shows worrying concern, a worrying pattern that over the years, all these BOD, DO, dissolved oxygen, and all these numbers have just increased significantly. Also, the DPCC report not only talks about the parameters, but it also, there's this report that they put out which gives details about the drains and the STPs, what is the current status of the sewage treatment plants, etc. So it shows that Delhi does not meet the required environment flow. So there has to be at least 23 cubics of e-flow, but right now that minimum quantity of flow that is needed for the river to have any kind of aquatic life is not met with.
And Devansh, you along with Sophiya actually travelled from Palla, where the Yamuna enters the city from Haryana, to Okhla, where the river flows into Uttar Pradesh. So tell us, what role does this river play for the city's residents and how important it is to them?
Yeah, Niharika. So to give you a brief answer about this, because we can go into details afterwards, but there are certain sections of people, for example, for whom the river matters a lot. For example, firstly, people who live on the banks of Yamuna. These are mostly slum dwellers. And then secondly, there are some people whose professions depend on the river. For example, fishermen or washermen. Yeah, so for these certain sections of people, the river matters a lot. And for also, it matters to some people for religious reasons, religious and spiritual reasons. And because of the high pollution levels that the Yamuna sees, a lot of residents have divorced their image of the city from the Yamuna.
And talking about the fishermen, Sophiya, considering the data that you shared with us regarding the pollution levels, how does that impact the fish in the river?
The number of fishes have died considerably, so much so that a recent February parliamentary panel report that was put out in February stated that the Yamuna river is virtually non-existent in Delhi, which means that there is absolutely no life form as an aquatic species, like the survival chances for fishes to actually be in the river, especially after the ITO barrage, because the DO levels really become zero and other parameters as well, like FC and BOD and all increases so much. So because of that, there is a particular section of the river which, like till Wazirabad, which still sees fishes like ruhu, but there's majority of the river stretch is it's not possible to actually do fishing.
And since you have a lot of people living on its banks, is it still used for bathing?
So we did find some people who use it for bathing, and I think Sophia can talk about her encounters with those. But it's a very small section of people who do use it for bathing, and a lot of them are also people who bathe in it for spiritual reasons on some occasions. But Sophia did meet some people who use it for regular bathing.
Yes, Devansh. So, elaborating on that, there were people that I found near to Wazirabad and also Sonia Vihar side, also at all these ghat areas where many people were youngsters and, kids were bathing and, happily taking a dip and all that in the river. It was like a very casual activity for them. So when I spoke to people, especially elderly people near to Nigambodh Ghat area and Shadghat area, they were saying it doesn't matter to them. The faith is what that drives them. So even though there were people, like for example, there was a farmer that we encountered in the Yamuna Khadar area in the East Delhi side. He told us that he gets allergy whenever he takes a bath in the river, but still they do that. Especially, they do not miss it in the days of, special occasions, religious occasions, like Chhat Puja and all that. Even though such activities are completely not allowed, there is also a certain kind of awareness among people. So the number of people who come out to take a bath in the river has definitely reduced considerably, is what people say, the residents say. And everybody most of the people whom we spoke to throughout the, stretch, they said that, they became nostalgic, how they would just, love to take bath. Many years ago, it was such a fun, such a memorable activity for them. Even the visitors who come to ghats, it has reduced considerably. So boatmen whom we encountered in these areas, ghat areas, they were saying that the visitors prefer to go to Haridwar or Ganga site. They no longer come up to Yamuna because of the increasing pollution. Even little children, little kids that I encountered were saying that they do not go near to the Yamuna river because of the strong stench. And it's such a, dirty water, they can't think of even like touching it or cleaning utensils or washing their clothes. Those kind of activities are also something that they can't think of.
And yet you found kids who did enjoy taking a dip in it.
Some portions people are aware and they distance themselves from the river, even though their livelihoods is still very much connected to it and all that. But on the other side, there are also children who are, especially in these ghat areas, where they do not give a second thought to it.
And while traveling its length, what were the kind of things that you guys observed? What are some things that stood out to you?
Yeah, so I'll just tell you some of the interesting things that I saw. One was that there was a lot of farming on the banks of Yamuna, and which I didn't imagine, like, because of the high pollution levels and how dirty the river is. And that strawberries and watermelons are being planted in Delhi on the banks of the Yamuna. Second was that children practicing water sports like kayaking and canoeing, and this Sonia Vihar Water Sports Club. This was also very surprising to us.
Yeah, people kayaking in the Yamuna is something that might come as a surprise to a lot of our listeners, actually.
Yeah, Niharika. So it was a surprise even for us. And I've been living in Delhi since I was born. And I didn't know that there were water sports being practiced on the Yamuna. So basically in Sonia Vihar, which is near Wazirabad, which is among the upper stretches of the Yamuna, there's a club called the Sonia Vihar Water Sports Club, which is financed by contributions from people around the club who live in Sonia Vihar. And basically here, students starting from age 12 to 18, they practice for competitive sports in kayaking and canoeing. And it's just marvelous that such a thing exists in Delhi and it's not very widely known. And, there are a lot of funding issues that this club faces also, but it's been surviving only on the basis of contributions by people from Sonia Vihar. And one other interesting thing that we saw in downstream Yamuna was that there were 6 cricket grounds on the banks of the river. So these cricket grounds are being watered. I think most probably they are illegal, and they are watered from the Yamuna river. And some people told us that people come to play cricket here on the weekends, and these are proper cricket grounds, mind you. These have pitches and these have team pavilions. So these were some of the interesting things that we saw. Sophiya can tell you what she found interesting.
What I found interesting was, apart from people living right next to the river, there were also people coming in from cities who live far away, who just, for some sort of recreation would stand next to the river and all that. So there were many people whom I encountered like that. On the other hand, there were people living in Juggis who were saying that there's a strong stench that comes from the river, so they don't go that much near to the river and all of that. There's a significant number of people who also find it very quiet, who also find it very different from what we can find in the city area. I met one person, for example, who was working as an electrician but would regularly come to the Yamuna Ghat side just because the person likes nature and likes to be connected. And he was lamenting how the number of migratory birds have reduced considerably and how the pollution has actually affected aquatic life forms and all that. So there's a diverse group, or we can say a fan following for the river, and that was very interesting. Of course, communities like another very important thing which I would like to point out is the Dhobi community, especially whom we encountered in Jamia Nagar side, which is a bit above Okhla barrage, towards that direction. So they have reduced considerably in numbers. Like before, they were in thousands. And now they have just reduced to 5, which was very shocking. We also see how communities are affected and how also the river attracts very different sections of people.
And Devansh, you talked about farming, and you write that the National Green Tribunal has actually banned farming along the Yamuna floodplains. So can you both share what reasons it gives for doing so? And how does the farming still take place there?
So there was a study that came up. It was done by National Environmental Engineering Research Institute. It found presence of heavy metals in vegetables grown on the Yamuna floodplain. And CSIR NIRE had also found in the river sludge the presence of heavy metals as well. So raising this, the National Green Tribunal had said that there cannot be any cultivation, and it had prohibited farming activities. And that was through an order in 2015. Then it was challenged in 2016, but still all those pleas were rejected by the National Green Tribunal itself, stating that it will enter the food chain. So it cannot be unless the Yamuna river is entirely restored and recovered, rejuvenated, that the cultivation activities can be allowed. So what happens is these cultivators are also supposed to be moved out from the area because it is illegal to cultivate in the Yamuna floodplains, but it's still happening because it's a tussle between authorities and the people. The farmers don't want to give away their land. Actually, when I spoke to farmers about this issue, they said they're not using water directly from the river. They're using water from bore wells. So that was their defense. So they were saying which is why it doesn't actually contaminate and affect the vegetables that they are cultivating there.
And Niharika, adding to this, it's significant that farming was one of the most common occupations that is practiced along the river banks. And what is interesting is that almost all of them tell us is that they don't use water directly from the Yamuna, because even in the cleanest stretch of the Yamuna, when it enters Delhi, the water is still so dirty that farmers claim that they don't use the river water. But one way that being on the floodplains is beneficial for farmers is also because when the river floods its floodplains, then and when it recedes back, it leaves behind rich mineral deposits deposits, which make the soil even more productive for farming. So to our surprise, we found, especially in beginning stretches of the Yamuna in Delhi, a lot of fruits being grown, such as watermelons, muskmelons, and strawberries. And there's obviously wheat, there's spring onions, and a lot of different vegetables being grown on the Yamuna floodplains.
Right. And along with farming, do any other type of economic activities take place on the banks of the Yamuna?
So, especially in the areas where ghats are situated, like starting from Vasudev Ghat and Sugh Ghat to ITU where Chhat Ghat is situated. Throughout that stretch, you can find shops which sell puja related items and boatmen, even people who wash like dhobis and all. So their livelihoods is intrinsically connected to the river, and even whatever they earn is completely dependent on the activities, the religious activities or even other kind of activities which is done along the riverside. So, for example, one elderly woman whom we encountered was from a boatsman family, and that was at Nigambodh Ghat. She had told us how their business has affected a lot. Even other boatmen were saying how business has affected a lot now because the number of visitors have gone down. Interestingly, there was also these pre-wedding photographers, videographers who are located near to the Yamuna River. So they do a lot of these shoots which is next to the riverside or on boats and all that. So there is a lot of busing economy that is completely dependent on river. And there was also one person who had told us because the government is increasingly focusing on cleaning the river Yamuna, maybe employment opportunities can also increase. So even when you look at things in that way, there's also blooming economy that is connected to the river.
And we know that the Yamuna holds a lot of religious significance, especially for Hindus. Has the pollution and the poor state of the river impacted the outlook that the people have towards it?
So Yamuna does still hold a huge amount of religious significance for people who do believe in those stories and who do worship Yamuna Mata. So like all across the river in our reporting we saw Yamuna Mata mandirs and across the river, and also there are many ghats which Sophiya reported from Nigambodh Ghat and Chhat Ghat and all these ghats, Vasudev Ghat, on which recently like a bi-weekly or something Aarti has also started similar to the ghats of Banaras, and floodplains of Yamuna are also used as the final resting places for a lot of Hindus. But I can't exactly answer if people's faith and how much they worship has declined due to the pollution levels of Yamuna.
And we've talked a lot about the extent to which the river is polluted. But do we know why does it continue to be that way?
Niharika, so even though Delhi government has progressed in its plan to rejuvenate Yamuna, and because it has, for many years created elaborate plans on how it would tap major drains, that outfall into River Yamuna. Among them is Najafgarh drain and Shadra drain. So the Delhi government has made over the years elaborate plans to increase the sewage treatment capacity of the capital, and because with increasing population there's also crisis that we are facing of not being able to manage the entire sewage waste that is being generated in the capital. So the Delhi government has significantly, increased it, built up STPs, built common effluent treatment plants over the years. But there have been many deadlines that Delhi Jal Board and different authorities have not been able to meet because of various issues, like the pandemic came up. That is what the experts had said. And a recent report by the Delhi government, Delhi Pollution Control Committee, which was out on February, shows that the total treatment capacity which might be achieved by the government by June 2025 would be still less than the required capacity, because the sewage generation rate that is estimated is much higher. So there's a gap that needs to be met. So this is a crucial issue. So we can say that augmenting sewage treatment plant capacity and also common effluent treatment plants, all these are very crucial factors to ensure that untreated sewage does not get discharged into the river Yamuna. Then there are a lot of major drains that outfall into river Yamuna. There are 22 drains in total that outfall into river Yamuna. These also, they're not completely tapped. It's in process. There has been more than 2,500 crores that has been spent just for cleaning the river Yamuna. But still we are seeing that there's a steep increase in different pollution quality parameters.
And Sophiya, are people living near the river also contributing to this problem? And also, are there things that the other residents are doing that are also of concern?
There are several unauthorized colonies. The sewage, managing the drainage structure for those colonies, all those needs to be taken care of. And there are so many encroachments that are illegal, that are present in this ecologically fragile zone. So even that is not been completely removed. And so there are a lot of things that still needs to be done. Then we see how people still continue to go to the river Yamuna to take a dip or, for religious activities, even and dump a lot of waste. Even though dumping of waste like malba and even, solid waste, household waste, all of that, it's not allowed for people to actually dump it in the river, but still we see how people just, get out and they drop waste from bridges. And so it's a very common sight in Delhi. So it's normalized. Because of these reckless activities of dumping waste and, neglect, it is a cause of concern and the Yamuna continues to be polluted.
And when you spoke to the residents, especially the older ones, do they recall a time when the river was actually clean?
Yeah, so when the river was actually clean was a long time back, according to residents that we spoke to. It was pre-2000. Was when they remember the river being clean throughout the year. But in recent times, residents remember that, the river always gets cleaner during the monsoon months when the flow is very high. And especially very interestingly, we found that when the river floods its floodplains, so it causes a lot of inconvenience and tragedy because people have to move, like people who live on the floodplains have to move farther away. And they lose their houses and belongings. But that is when they remember last taking a dip and bathing in the river, at least some of the residents. And they say things like, Sikka agar fenkte the to Sikka dikhta tha. Like if you throw a coin in the river at that time, you can see the coin in the river because the river is cleaner. But that is only during when the river floods.
And one of the main poll planks for the BJP this time was that they will clean up the river. In fact, Delhi Chief Minister Rekha Gupta has also spoken about this.
यमुना केवल एक नदी नहीं है हमारे लिए, एक नदी नहीं है, बल्कि ये हमारी सांस्कृतिक और ऐतिहासिक धरोहर है. हमारी धरोहर है, हमारी माँ है, आराध्य है. यमुना की सफाई हमारे घोषणा पत्र का एक महत्वपूर्ण अंग है और इस बजट की भी मुख्य प्राथमिकताओं में से एक है. यमुना भारतीय सभ्यता के ताने बाने में बहती हुई जीवन रेखा है. हम सब के लिए जीवन रेखा है. लेकिन दुर्भाग्य है कि पिछली सरकार इसे स्वच्छ करने में विफल रही. हमारी सरकार निर्णायक कदम उठाएगी और लगातार यमुना जी को निर्मल और स्वच्छ बनाए जाने की दिशा में काम करेंगे. इसके लिए हमने 500 करोड़ रुपए की लागत से 40 डिसेंट्रलाइज्ड सीवेज प्लांट ताकि कोई भी गंदा नाला यमुना जी में ना गिरे, इसके लिए हमने 500 करोड़ रुपए की अलग से व्यवस्था की है ताकि वो सीवेज.
Now with all these promises, do people who rely on the river have any hopes that it might actually happen?
So, Niharika, when we spoke to people, it was a very mixed response that we got. Yes, largely people did feel very positive that there might be a change. But there were also similarly people who were very pessimistic about it. They were saying even during the up tenure, there have been machines, there have been efforts to clean the river. So how is it going to be any different? And for example, earlier I mentioned about a young man who was an electrician who just came to the riverside because of his connect to nature. So he asked whether the river can be revived, because it's a question of wonder. It's a question that ignites all of them alike. Like, nobody knows what the answer would be. But of course, right now is the time when it is being heavily discussed in media and among political parties than ever before. So maybe because of that, we've noticed that more residents do think that something might happen. There could be some kind of change.
You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar and produced by Shashank, Bhargava and me, Niharika, Nanda. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it. Share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Audio and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.